Out of all 365 days in a year, why does India's independence land specifically on August 15th? The struggle for freedom spanned nearly a century, tracing back to the 1857 rebellion. But despite decades of organized Indian pressure, the specific exit date arrived as a sudden, unilateral British mandate. By the close of the Second World War, the British Empire was exhausted. Fighting a global conflict had drained their finances and severely weakened their geopolitical grip, making it impossible to govern their most valuable overseas territory. Because of this exhaustion, London finally agreed to a transfer of power. But the target date they drafted wasn't in 1947. The official plan was to leave India in June of 1948. To move the timeline of a massive imperial withdrawal forward by 10 whole months means the administration wasn't executing a structured plan. They were panicking. The catalyst for that panic started in 1946. Indian sailors in the Royal Indian Navy mutinied, taking over ships and naval establishments. For the British, this was a terrifying signal. The military apparatus they used to suppress the population was turning against them. At the same time, the domestic political situation had hit a complete deadlock. While the Indian National Congress pushed for a unified state, the Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, held an uncompromising demand for an entirely separate nation. This political standoff spilled into the streets. In August 1946, Calcutta experienced a devastating outbreak of communal violence during Direct Action Day. Thousands were killed in a matter of hours, and riots rapidly spread across the country. Into this volatile environment stepped Lord Mountbatten, appointed as the final Viceroy of India. He arrived to find a colony on the absolute brink of an all-out civil war. Recognizing that British authority was collapsing and lacking the military power to restore order, Mountbatten made an executive decision. He scrapped the 1948 deadline and ordered the British administration to pull out in 1947. Accelerating the year was a raw administrative necessity to escape the chaos. But out of all the days he could have picked in that compressed time frame, Mountbatten chose August 15th, a date that had absolutely no historical resonance in India. So how did a foreign viceroy land on that exact date? The answer isn't found in the ledgers of the Indian National Congress or the Muslim League. It requires looking at Mountbatten's own military service record in Southeast Asia during the Second World War. 2 years prior to the stroke of midnight in Delhi, on August 15, 1945, Imperial Japan formally surrendered to the Allied forces, bringing the war in Asia to a close. At that time, Mountbatten served as the Supreme Allied Commander of the Southeast Asia Command. He viewed that surrender as the crowning achievement of his military career. The timeline of India's independence wasn't guided by political consensus or regional astrology. The final date was selected simply because the outgoing British viceroy wanted to commemorate the second anniversary of his own personal military victory. This military vanity explains India's date, but it introduces an obvious logistical problem. Pakistan celebrates its independence on August 14th. As the representative of the British Crown, Mountbatten was required to formally transfer power to both newly formed nations in person. He could not be in two places at once on the 15th, so the schedule was staggered. Mountbatten attended Pakistan's independence ceremonies in Karachi on the 14th, before flying back to Delhi to preside over India's handover at midnight. While the Viceroy's flight itinerary was neatly organized, the reality on the ground was unraveling. The new borders, drawn up hastily by a British lawyer named Cyril Radcliffe, tore through densely populated provinces. When the partition plan was finalized, millions of people who had lived on the same land for generations found themselves living on the wrong side of an invisible, newly invented border. Entire communities were forced to abandon their homes. Trains swelled with refugees moving in opposite directions across the Punjab and Bengal borders, triggering a wave of retributive massacres along the routes. By compressing the timeline to meet an arbitrary anniversary, the administration abandoned any structured transition, triggering one of the largest and deadliest mass migrations in human history. Despite the chaos fracturing the borders, the atmosphere in New Delhi on the night of August 14th was highly charged. Inside the legislative halls, the Constituent Assembly gathered. Leaders from across the subcontinent took their seats, waiting to accept sovereignty from the British Crown. Moments before the deadline, Jawaharlal Nehru stood before the assembly and delivered his Tryst with Destiny speech, promising the birth of a nation that would awaken to life and freedom. As the clock struck 12, the legal machinery of the empire halted. In that precise instant, India ceased to be a colonial possession and became an independent dominion. The handover transferred absolute authority into Indian hands, finalizing a political struggle that had consumed the lives of millions over decades. Hours later, on the morning of August 15th, the new Indian tricolor was hoisted into the sky, greeted by massive crowds across the capital. This marked the genesis of a lasting tradition, where the Prime Minister addresses the public from the commanding ramparts of the Red Fort. Yet, the man most synonymous with this victory was completely missing from the celebrations. Mahatma Gandhi was nowhere near New Delhi. He was stationed deep within the slums of Calcutta, undertaking a brutal fast in a desperate attempt to quell the ongoing sectarian violence tearing the city apart. He refused to celebrate. In his view, a political transition held no moral value if the citizens of the newly freed country were slaughtering each other in the streets. The story of August 15th is heavily layered. Ultimately, sovereignty was secured through the imprisonment, struggle, and cumulative endurance of millions, far outweighing the influence of any single leader or legislative act. The date we celebrate is a strange intersection of national triumphs, arbitrary imperial vanity, and staggering human tragedy. If you want to uncover more of the intricate realities behind the history we take for granted, make sure to subscribe and join us for the next deep dive.